start. Well, hi there, folks. This is WP-Tonic Live. This should be a great show this Saturday, June the 4th. I've got some initial great guests, and we've got another of the panel that's appeared, Russell. We're going to start off the show with some WordPress news stories, and then we're going to go into the main topic. I'm going to let Russell in. And, there we go. Oh, here he is, the man himself. Hello, Russell.
Hey, good morning.
Hey, Russell. Good morning.
Hi.
Oh, here comes trouble. I'm going to start off. I'm going to let the we should have some of the other panelists joining us, so I'm going to drop out and let John run it.
Okay.
And so I think we start
like, who's me?
Pardon? What's that? What's that?
He's like, I can do this. Let's go.
I'm just going to drop out. All right. I'm going to ask the initial panel just to introduce themselves, and that's.
You know what this is like, Jonathan. It's like, hey, let's all go out to dinner, and then you're like, no, I'm not hungry, and then you bail.
Got to start somewhere. We've got another panel. Go on, Jackie, introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Jackie DeLeo with Jackie DeLeo Design, and I build sites for clients. Just do lots of other things too, but that's about it. You can find me at JackieDeLeo.com. It's nice to meet you.
I can tell, Jackie, you got that glint in your eye. Well, go on, Russell. Introduce yourself, Russell.
I guess if I have to. So my name is Russell Aaron. I run everything here in Vegas, the WordPress Meetup, the WordCamp Las Vegas 2016, and I work for a little company called Web Dev Studios.
Oh, well, there you go. What happens in Dallas, Las Vegas?
What happens in Dallas? Like, that's like 1,000 miles that way. And you can find me on RussellENVY.com.
Thanks. Go on, John, my beloved co-host. Introduce yourself.
Sure thing. My name's John Locke, and I run just a little consultancy called Lockdown Design. There you go.
Right. So what I propose is that we go through some quick news stories, folks, and then I'm going to bail out for 15 minutes, let one of the other panelists join. So I had some great stories sent to me. I thought we'd start off, and I'm going to probably butcher his name totally. It was the WP.org domain. Can you pronounce the gentleman's name?
Syed Balkhi.
Balkhi. Yeah. Syed Balkhi. So he's giving the WP.org, and you thought this is interesting, John. So can you start it off why you thought it was interesting in that?
Yeah, sure. So apparently for a long time, WP.org has been owned by Syed Balkhi, and it's been pointing toward WP Beginner. And I think somebody pointed this out on Twitter that, when you type that in, it goes there. And I think Matt Mullenweg had a comment about that, like something like sounds sketchy or something like that. But Syed Balkhi had a change of heart. He decided to donate it to the WordPress Foundation, and now it's pointing toward WordPress.org.
So he kind of had that moment, the road to Damascus moment, where he saw the light, did he?
Well,
go ahead.
Go on.
He's having a baby, and I think that kind of just changed the way that he saw how things are being done, and instead of holding things for greed. I mean, WP Beginner has blown up. I mean, bigger than it has ever been. And I think he realizes he doesn't need that to remain successful.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Russell. That's how I interpreted it a bit. What do you think, Jackie?
I think it's appropriate. I mean, it's a .org domain name, and I think that was really nice of him to do that and to donate it. I'm sure when he first acquired it, it made sense to point it to WP Beginner, but I think it was a good move on his part.
Also, it didn't have the word WordPress in it; it just had WP. So
correct.
It wasn't a morally wrong thing to do.
Yes.
I mean, early bird gets the worm, right?
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Russell. I don't think it was anything wrong what he did. I just think he just done it for the just to build goodwill and, the other things you mentioned, Russell. So
I already have WP-Tonic on .blog. I mean, I beat Jonathan Deadwood to it.
You can have it. You can have it.
Today there's so many different.
Do you want to write for me, Russell? You're most welcome. You've got to contribute, for free. That's great, funny. Russell. If you want to write anything for me, you can bud it on my website.
What's that, Jackie?
There's so many different domain extensions now available. So if somebody has a business name, there's so many other options. You're not going to buy like 100 different domain names to try to protect your, your initial domain. To me, but a .org really made sense to donate it to WordPress Foundation, I thought.
Yeah, I thought that was sensible.
I mean, you could have WP.net. You could have, I'm sure there's a gazillion combinations. .io,
.xyz.
I'm sure there are people that own them.
Yeah. All right, I think we said enough about that. So on to the next one. UpThemes sells his theme shop and he's hosting to, how do you pronounce it? Can you help? Parallels. Yes. Where did I get these names from? So he sold it. Got any thoughts about this one, John?
Yeah, I would say that it just seems like balancing client work and a theme shop is very difficult. And I think other people that are still doing it successfully, like Matt Medeiros, might agree with that. But I think, 5, 6, 7 years ago, themes were kind of a big thing as far as running a theme shop. You could make a lot of money and maybe, supplement that with your client services. And I think what you're seeing right now is a lot of people shifting products toward plugins for whatever reason.
Well, it used to be that plugins, they didn't have a bad rap, but plugins were kind of still something that people feared. And so if a theme did everything, or the sales technique of this theme does this, people thought, oh, I need a theme, I need this. And it was people like Pippin and myself and Chris Lemma and people like that. I'm not trying to compare myself to Chris Lemma, to be clear. All I'm saying is that...
Well, is that physically or mentally, actually?
I'm not going to comment on that. But regardless, what happened was there were people out there saying plugins are not bad and you should let the theme just handle the look and let a plugin handle the functionality. And I think that's finally kicking in.
What's your thoughts, Jackie?
I agree. I mean, even my work that I'm doing now for clients is definitely moving a lot of things into plugins, whether it's a must-use plugin that I ship with the site, or it's just some optional plugins that I've added, and I'm refraining from adding functionality into the theme. Unless it's like a truly, truly, really custom theme where they're never going to switch their theme. But I think those cases are going to be rare. I think you're better off working with plugins, and I think once you get the hang of it, it's real easy to do. It's nice.
Well, not only that, but for a long time there was the thought that too many plugins are a bad thing. Yeah. And when people find out that Matt Mullenweg has over 200 plugins on his site, people kind of start listening and saying, oh, maybe they're not so bad. Plugins aren't bad because they're called plugins. Plugins are bad because somebody wrote bad code once. It's not the plugin's fault. It's because the guy was drunk or the guy wasn't thinking, or you know what I mean? I'm that guy, by the way. I'm an alcoholic. Hi. I wrote a plugin once. It hacked the WordPress admin. And it was because I wrote a little bit of bad code, It
happens, doesn't it?
When you start out, you're going to write bad code, but eventually you'll get better, But I shouldn't be labeled as a bad developer because I wrote, 16 bad lines of code,
Oh, you're a terrible person, Russell.
Fair enough.
Shocking. Well, I thought I did when I read the article, the main thing I found was interesting was that he was saying that it's about 10% of the business comes from the theme shop side, but it contributed 50% of the net profit to his whole business, but 80 to 90% of his time was I think he says in the article 80% of his time is taken up by the consultancy business. So in my flippant way, I was thinking, mate, maybe you're selling the wrong but obviously selling the consultancy is not practical. Maybe in some ways it's easier to sell the theme shop. So that's what he decided to do. What do you reckon, John? Am I rambling, or was there some logic in what I was saying?
No, I just think that it's hard to split your forces, until you get to a certain size and you say, like, just these people over here are going to work on products, and just these people over here are going to work on services, which is, you look at like a larger team like Web Dev Studios, and that is exactly what they're doing. They have a team that's just for products, and they have a team that's just for services. So,
right, yeah, I think we discussed that. Well, you want to talk about this Jetpack thing? You sent that to me, didn't you, John? About
yes,
Jetpack?
I did. So, yeah, Jetpack, they launched like a developer resource page to show people, the different hooks and filters that they can use. And Jetpack, it's, for those who don't know, it's a plugin, but it's more like a suite of plugins. It's a whole bunch of modules. It's one of the more downloaded in, plugins that's in the repo. But now they have a developer page so that people can more adequately develop for the different aspects of Jetpack. What's your thoughts, Russell?
Big fan of Jetpack. Got it going on right here.
Cool.
So here's the thing: is like not everything in Jetpack I agree with, but you can turn it off and it doesn't affect your site. I've never had beautiful math turned on, but I imagine that I'm going to try to use it one day, and maybe that's today. Who knows? Here's the thing about Jetpack is that it's one of those plugins that people love or people dislike. Nobody's kind of like, yeah, I like it, but whatever. People usually have a strong opinion on it, and I think that Jetpack, with their dedicated team of core developers, with George Stephanus leading the way, I trust them wholeheartedly. I know that they are not out to have my site spy on me or to report things back to them. I know that they're doing things with good intentions, so I fully trust them.
There you go. I thought it was a great idea. Actually, I think it's really a very positive thing for them to do. Actually, provide a resource where you got all the filters, actions. You can read it. I think it's going to help them a lot by providing that kind of resource. What do you reckon, Jackie?
I think that's a good idea. I don't use Jetpack very much, but I do have some clients that do, and it would be nice. I think it's nice to be able to have the information so that you can customize it if you want to and make changes to it. So that's pretty nice.
Yeah, I'm not a big user of it. I've got nothing against it. It is what it is. But I think what they're doing, I think, is a quite a positive move, and I think it only help them by doing that.
Well, we found out in Las Vegas when we had the open discussion and we led off with Jetpack that it actually takes a lot of load off your website. Like it's if you're using Photon, it's using that as a CDN. If you are using like social sharing, all that stuff is coming from WordPress.com, and you don't have to have those scripts or all that stuff loaded and being queried on your website. And it takes a lot of load off of what you're trying to do, and I appreciate that.
Cool. Something like a load being taken off, isn't it?
It's like imagine having a small little plugin that gives you 40 extra miles a gallon. that would be incredible. And why would you say that that's horrible? Everybody wants better gas mileage,
Oh well, there we go. All right, so I think they were the stories that took me on. There were some other stories, but I thought, shall we go on to the main topic? Tools and tips connected to building WordPress websites. And I was looking at maybe some of the things. I was looking at maybe desktop servers, they might help, browser extensions or plugins that could help, text editors, and just any general stuff that comes to the panel's eyes. I think you hit this off, and then I might leave for 15 minutes and let Sally join us. But
my favorite part is that earlier you said you were going to leave, and then now you're putting a time limit on it.
Do you want me to leave completely Russell?
Jonathan, you amaze me and make me laugh at the same time.
Look, Russell, you've got to understand you're dealing with Englishness here. It's a different mind. I know you're American, but this is a kind of different mindset, my friend.
Funny,
it's kind of English bonkers. Right? Right. So, shall we start? So, panel, would you agree maybe starting off with, is it a good idea to have a desktop server? If you're starting to develop sites for other people, do you think it's a good idea to have a desktop server, a local development setup?
Yes.
Yes, because what I want people to know first and foremost before you start building is that you need to learn how to make a backup before you learn how to install themes. Because if you break your theme and you don't have a backup, you go back to square one. If you have a backup, you can get back to square 15 or 16 or whatever. So having something like desktop server or using VVV, you can build things locally, and then you can push them up to your website. And if they break, you still have a backup and a local copy that you can pull from.
Right. So some of the ones I stuck with it. I use MAMP 3. I've been using it for donkey's years, and I've just stuck with it.
Here's the question: Are you using MAMP on a Windows or on a Mac computer? Because they make them for both.
Yeah, they do, which is great. And then you got XMPP. That's free. I've never used it. Do you think it's any good, actually, Russ?
XAMPP? Yeah, I love XAMPP. Currently, these days, I'm using varying variables. I'm using VVV, but if I need to spin up a quick instance, yeah, sure. I think XAMPP and MAMP are two good resources.
And then you got ServerPress.
I use it.
Oh, you use it?
Yeah.
And how have you found it? What you like about it and what you don't like about it?
I use that, and I also use MigrateDB Pro. Both of those in my development process, and it depends on the client and whether or not they have an existing site and they're still working on it. There's lots of variables that go with that, but a combination of those things. I usually build out the site, locally. And then I'll push it up. I'll push it up to a staging server, typically for them to look at while we're working on it and making decisions about it. But I've also got a situation now where I have a client I'm pulling down their live data every day or two to my local dev. And I'm using MigrateDB Pro for that with the media file add-on. So when they're building it out, they're loading their images and everything, so I can just pull it all down. So what I'm working on now, and I've just kind of segregated things, I'm only working on files. So I'm not doing anything with the database at this point. So I'm building out the styles and doing all of that, and I keep pulling down their live data every day. And then I'll push mine up to a staging server if we wanted to try some other things out without kind of disrupting what they're working on.
Sure, fair enough. 2 points for Jackie for dropping that staging server. I'm a huge fan of moving your website anywhere else and breaking it there instead of on your live site.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's the kind of methodology that I use, Russell, because basically it goes to a staging site and they can see what's happening, and then they pay me and then I move it to their site.
Bingo.
Payment is rather important, Russell.
Absolutely. That's the way to go.
Well, so I think what gets lost in translation a lot and why we move things to staging is, number one, your computer locally is not going to be the same setup as a server that's on the host. Number two is that until, like Jonathan said, until you get paid, you want to have control and say, no, you can't use this until you pay for it, right? Like, I think a lot of people think that staging is just supposed to be this middle ground kind of thing, but it's actually a tool that developers use to protect what they've worked on.
Well, they soon learn the facts. What about you, John? What do you use any of these, John? And which one?
No, I am thinking about using a desktop server pretty soon here, but my methodology is a little bit different, and maybe it's just because I usually just work on the theme by myself. But usually I just go ahead and have a staging server that I control, and then, whether it's for a client or for another agency, I do rapid development and, do daily backups to that. And then when it's ready, go ahead and send that to them. They can look at it, and then we make like final changes if any are necessary. Then we send it on to their server. So,
sure.
Yeah.
I think one advantage of developing locally is if you're like designing in the browser and making a lot of changes, it's just a lot faster to update things. I use, I'm using Grunt right now, and I'm looking at switching to Gulp. But for right now, my local dev environment set up, I'm using Grunt. And I'm using Sass. So I'm making all of my changes to the styles, and it's nice to have it just compile, and it's easy. It's faster to work on a local dev. If I had to push that up somewhere and wait for that and the back and forth time, I just find I'm a lot more efficient now that I'm on a local dev.
Well,
there's an extra step. You still have to push it up to the staging for your client to see it and things, but that's okay.
There's an added bonus to doing things locally, and what that bonus is that especially with like Desktop Server and Desktop Server Pro, is you can build blueprints. So you can say, no matter what, I'm going to always install these 5 plugins, and you can actually build that into your core. So every time you do an install on Desktop Server, it's got these 6 things already there. You don't have to go download them every single time. You do have to update them inside of the scripts, but regardless, they're going to be included, and it makes building it makes your workflow a lot quicker.
It makes spinning up test sites and things easy because you've got, like you said, you have all your plugins set up in the blueprint, and you just roll it out, and it's like you're ready to go.
Ready to go. Let those wagons roll. All right. Right, let's go on to some, because like I say, I never use ServerPress, but I met the guys, and the wizard spent almost a day with them. Took all their time up. I thought he was going to actually looking for a job with them. So they seem a great crowd. I've just kept with MAMP free out of habit, really, but it does the job for me. I'm a kind of hybrid. I kind of initially develop locally, and then I do what John does. I bun it up to test server. I just find it easier, John, to do so much, like a third of it locally, and then I decide when I got it to a certain stage, then I bun it up to a test server, which the client can then chirp in at different levels of chirpiness. So let's move on then. Let's go maybe to, are there any other resources around desktop development that you know about, Russell, that you would recommend?
So I sat in a talk in WordCamp Minneapolis from Brad Parbs, who is a fellow Web Dev Studios coworker, and he was talking about installing this thing. It's called VV, Varying Variables, and so it uses VirtualBox, but it creates a virtual server, and you can install anything that's going to be on your client's server, you can install it locally. And so you kind of have, you can bring their server to you instead of you having to go to their server, and you can test on your computer locally, and you can know about 90% about what you're going to expect from that server. And that just gives you a better plan on why you're building, instead of building it locally on desktop server, pushing it up to Nginx and finding out, oh man, our transients don't work or something. I think VVV is phenomenal, and I will link to the installing VV on the codex.
All right. So how hard is it to install? Is it a bit painful? Is it reasonably easy, do you think?
If you're familiar with the command line, or if you can follow a tutorial, it's very simple. The hardest part about it is letting the command line work and not touching it. And the hardest part is actually watching it, because through several steps, it's going to ask you for your computer's admin password. And so if you just walk away, it's not going to install because it wants permission to do this and it wants permission to do this. I've sat through this many times.
And so how long does it take to install then, on average?
For like the first time, I mean, it's like 7, 8, 9 minutes, depending on your computer processor and your bandwidth, stuff like that.
All right then, doesn't sound too painful. But I think you're right. I think I'm a bit impatient, and if you decide to walk away, you're going to have a bit of a problem, aren't you? So thanks for pointing those out.
Yeah.
Oh, the other thing I didn't talk about. What about let's say you want to test, like you're forced to test. You're on a Mac and you've got to test, Explorer or Edge and that. How do you handle that, folks, Jackie? Do you have a virtual? Are you a PC or Mac person to start off with?
I'm a Mac person, but there's some subscriptions you can have that'll let you go in and run things on different browsers. But I forgot the name of it. I've used it in the past, but frankly, I don't do that much of it with that. It seems like I haven't had any problems so far. I've got clients that have Windows, and I think Edge is better now. Things are better. I mean, I don't do any coding for like Internet Explorer 8 or anything like that. I've just let it all go. It's over. Let's just move on and streamline things and clean up our style sheets and get better with that.
Yeah, let's just go for
it. But I'm
it.
sure Russell probably knows more about testing in different environments.
Well, so I'm a Mac guy at heart, and but I have Parallels set up on my Mac. So I run WordCamp, and so that way I can just switch between Mac and through Windows, and I can go test over there. There are a couple things that you have to know how to set up, and you can read more about those. But for the most part, it does the job, and it gives me a good sense of what I'm trying to do. Instead of paying for something that's going to just show me a screenshot of IE6, IE7, IE8, I would rather run something locally on my computer.
Do you think it makes sense just to buy a cheap Windows box and just have it laying around for testing? Or
yes and no, because you can keep a different version of Windows on it. So I have Windows 10 on my WordCamp right now, but I have a computer I'm looking at right now that has 8 on it, and I have another computer that has 7 on it. So if I need to test a very specific instance of Windows to see if I can recreate the problem, yeah. But I mean, do you have to go out and spend $800 in 3 different computers to do that? I don't think so.
No. It's just
especially with how easy it is to spin up virtual box in a virtual environment.
Yeah, well, Jackie, it's just they do take up a lot. Especially if you've got a solid disk hard drive, Jackie, they do take up a bit of room. So I just put them on a external hard drive. You need something that's either
that.
USB 3. It's going to be a bit too slow. And then I have a little external hard drive that has about 4 or 5 different versions of Parallels is like one I use, but there's also Sun is it called VirtualBox? I think it's called VirtualBox.
Yeah, VirtualBox, and then there's another one called VMware.
Yeah, they're all pretty good, Jackie. And when you set it up and you have these different versions, you just power up which version you want from your Mac, and it runs it. You just need a lot of memory, and it's the memory thing. You know, if you're running a lot of stuff and you only got 4 gig of memory, it's going to kind of.
Oh no, I have 32, so I'm good.
Whoa.
So I have 32 on my iMac as well. But so what happens with the VirtualBox is what you're doing is you are dedicating. It's not like you're going to lose it forever. It's not like you're going to give 2 gigs to the virtual. Now your computer's only running 30. What happens is when you start it, it's going to take 2 from you, but you're still going to be able to use this. And so. Most people forget that moving it all the way up to 8 when you only have 8 means that your virtual environment is going to fly, but anything you're trying to do on your operating system that's not virtually is going to be way slow. So it's just you're trying to balance what you're trying to do.
Yeah. And what I do, Jack, is when I am like you, I just do it. I like to see what, even though it's been clearly said that none of these old browsers are going to be supported, I just like to quickly see what is going on, because just in case somebody comes back and asks me a question, I said, well, I'm aware of it, but it wasn't supported in an agreement, and then there's only like 2% of the world population of your visitors that are going to use it. Yeah. So is it really worth spending another $1,000? Blah blah blah. What do you reckon, John?
Yeah, certainly. Like Internet Explorer 8 and 9, they're generally not supported for. They're not supported at all, like right now. But but what I was going to say is, there's a lot of instances where you do have to develop for those. And that would be in the enterprise where people don't upgrade their OSs. It's a big undertaking to upgrade from Windows XP to what's current. And so that you might run into an instance where you have to support those. Another case is nonprofits. There are like some nonprofits that require you to support Windows 8 and 9. Or I should say Internet Explorer 8 and 9. I was going to offer something too, is a bit of a resource for people who might be a little bit intimidated by all the technical, aspects of setting. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Setting up like their own virtual machine and stuff like that. There's a service called BrowseJack. And I think it's like $19 a month, and you can browse. They're on live machines. It's Windows. All different types of configurations, all different types of browsers, all the way to current Safari, which is actually what, coincidentally, it's weird, but that's what I actually use service for, is for the newer versions of Safari. Because they are a little bit problematic as compared to like Firefox or Chrome to develop for. But for $39 a month, you get like unlimited time. So that's also a consideration. So,
and John, you're talking about live viewing, not snapshots, right? So you're
live viewing.
Able to browse the website, look at. Yeah, so that would be beneficial if you wanted to see how your design is rendering on a specific browser.
Yeah. So instead of like setting up, and they also, I think it's like simulated for different Android devices and iOS and stuff like that, and they're pretty accurate. So again, if you don't want to set up like a whole computer lab with different OSs, then that's definitely an alternative.
Sounds good to me.
I have one use case where you have to build for IE, and I used to work for the National Weather Service, and all those government places, they're still on XP, because XP was still considered to be a stable release of Windows, and so we had to we had to expect that, okay, they're going to be using this version or they're going to be using this. So we had to test for that. The mortgage industry as well. A lot of mortgage-based websites are still ASPX-based, and they only work in Windows, and they only work in IE. So you kind of have to build that when you're pulling ASPX resources into your WordPress website.
Yeah, it's really important to know like what the clients are going to be looking at it is, and this is like a couple of years ago. I had a client. They're like, oh, how come the website looks off? And come to find out that they're looking at it like on XP in the AOL browser. So,
yeah,
and they have the Yahoo toolbar up top.
Sure. So finding that stuff out is like important. Yeah, definitely.
Oh yeah.
All right. So I think we move on to next one I've got, next kind of subheader is browser extensions and plugins. So I think anybody that's getting into it, they need to know something about Firebug or Chrome development tools. They're two great browser extensions. So Jackie, do you use either Firebug or
Chrome right now? I use Chrome to debug there, and it works fine for me. So I haven't had any complaints. I have all the browsers installed, so I test out on different ones. But primarily, I'm in Chrome.
Here's a question, and I don't think you have Firefox Developer installed, do you?
I might, but I'm not using it very much.
So I build in Firefox Developer just because it gives you so many different tools. But then I will go and look at it in Chrome, and I will go and look at it in my other ones. But I use Firefox Developer primarily just for a lot of the resources that they provide.
I'm the same, Russ. It's just a great resource, isn't it, Russ? He's paid.
So somebody just asked like what kind of resources. So Firefox Developer, it's going to give you it gives you a 3D look at your website, so you can actually see the layers, and you can actually see for like CSS, you can see what's topping what or why something is on top of each other. Another resource is so I use either Sublime Text or I use Atom to build, and I can use oh god, I forget the name of it, but I can just update what I'm doing in Sublime Text, and it refers, it sends it to the browser, and so I don't have to upload or refresh or do anything. It's live instances, and Chrome does this really well, but I think Firefox does it better.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, they're both great tools. It's just I've stuck with Firework.
And a Katy Perry video all of a sudden. Fireworks.
Yeah. Fireworks. Yeah, I know. You said something. You like old bloody water cooler. You were nasty to me a few episodes ago. But I noticed one of your contributors stood up for me, and she said that she uses it as well. So there you go. You developers.
John, can we go back just for a second to the developer tools and stuff? The other thing that we didn't mention is just use Git. Use version control when you're developing. It has saved me so many times when I've started going down a path and changing a design and doing something. And fortunately, I did a commit right before I started that, or I branched it. And if you can get in the habit of using that, it makes your life a lot easier. It really does.
Well,
but I don't use it. Be quite honest with you, Jackie.
It makes your workflow so much better. Number one, and number two is so I use SVN, or we use SSH, but very similar to Git. And so what we do is when I'm building something, I have SVN installed on my computer, so I'm keeping a local copy and I'm keeping each version control, and so that way I can go back and I can say, I forgot what I did in 1.3 to 1.4, what were the differences, and I can go back and look instead of saying, well, all I do is cowboy code, and I do it on my live site, and I don't remember what I did 6 months from now. So it kind of gives you that footprint of a change log. with your code, instead of updating a changelog per se, you can just go back and look at your code.
Great. And the other thing is it lets you test things out. So if you're working on a plugin or you're doing something and you want to try some other way of doing it, you can branch and try it out. If it doesn't work, you can kill that branch. Or if it does and it's great and like this is even better, you can just merge it back in and you're good to go. If you ever need to roll back, you can. I love that.
Or if you're getting help from somebody like John Locke and you guys are in two different places, he can submit a pull request or he can pull down or push up, and that way you guys can work on things locally, but it keeps, even though you're merging your files together, it keeps a copy of what John did to what I did, just in case we need to revert back.
All right then, Jackie, do you use any kind of tools? I know I did use it for a little while. I was using a tool on the Mac called Tower to help with it. Do you use any kind of tools
to help with Git? Or
yeah.
No, I just use Git on the command line. That's where I live.
I live on the command line.
I do as well. I'm a keyboard hero myself. But there's lots of tools that you can use. Git actually has their own GUI, their own dashboard that you can use. Atlassian makes a thing called Source Tree, which makes it really easy to push up to something like a GitHub or to a Bitbucket. But for the most part, I'm using SVN and I'm using the command line just because I build plugins for the plugin repo, and you have to use the terminal to do that.
All right. But this is the one I've got on my machine. I'm going to put it in. This is really handy, folks, if you don't want to become a command hero. There we go. So that's a nice little tool there, folks. So you two are really into the old Git, and I'm not, and I don't think you're really that much, are you, John?
Hold on. I had the mic off because I was answering something in the chat room.
Yep.
No, I mean, I use Git, just not extensively. I mean, to be honest, I'll answer honestly. Like, I use it like more if I'm working with like other people. For my own purposes, I usually just go in and edit, just either in the editor or like FTP is just quicker for me. Like I said, I usually, though, like when I'm developing, I'm usually the only person like working on it. When I work in teams, though, sometimes that is, more of a requirement. That's when I use Git. So.
Radio. So another one, a service that I use a lot is CodePen. I just love it. I love CodePen.
Is so cool.
And I've learned an enormous amount from it, and it's just a great tool. Do you by the sound of things, you use it, Jackie?
I do, and I love when there's examples and you can go try things out on CodePen and play with it, and it's a great way to learn about new things that are out.
Yeah, what about you, John? Do you use
CodePen?
it at all?
Yeah, I use it. Here and there to test stuff out. Most definitely. It's useful, and it's pretty useful actually to find if you can find like what's good about it is you can find like other people's what they've done and kind of change it up and test stuff on your own.
Well, the great thing is you can actually see it working. You know what they're saying they've done. You can actually see it. So unlike a lot of other resources where you read it and then you take their code, you muck it around, you try and learn from it, but then you find that it never works on day one. But where on this, it's obvious it works. They've got some idea what they're doing. You can look at the code, you can mess around with it, you can learn from it. I just think it's a great resource. What about you, Russell?
So I don't use CodePen. I like the idea of having something where I can see, and I definitely love looking at other people's code because as a developer, when somebody says, "Hey Russ, I want you to build this," I'm going to go look for other technologies out there that already do what they're looking to do. That way, it's going to save me and it's going to save my client a lot of time instead of having to rebuild it from scratch. But if I really need to test something out, I use something like JS Fiddle or whatever I'm testing. Like if I'm testing JavaScript, I'm going to use JS Fiddle. If I'm testing CSS or Sass, I'm going to go use another tool that's specifically designed for that. Not so much an all-in-one kind of thing.
Oh, yeah. Another good one is Auto Prefixer. If you're into SAS, does it do LAS at all, or is it just SAS? It does. I don't quite remember. But this is another pretty good online service that helps out. Do you use that at all, Jackie? Because I know
use
you're
Auto
into SAS.
Prefixer in my grunt. Yeah, it handles all of that, and you can just tell it how many browser versions you want to go back to, and usually I'm like 2 versions or something like that. That works fine, and it handles it all for you, so you're done.
Yeah,
you don't even have to think about it. And it makes, when you're writing your SAS, it makes it nice and clean because you have a lot less in there. You don't have all those distractions of all the other prefixes. So it's nice, but the final version gets done for you, and it's great.
Yeah, it's a great tool, isn't it? I only used it. I've only been mucking around with SAS a little bit.
I wasn't actually on SAS. I just started using it last year, and I watched some WordCamp talk about it, and I got interested in it. And there was a course on Treehouse I took that was
phenomenal course.
There was one course on there that I really loved because it just connected with me and made it easy. It was converting CSS to SAS, and it was Gil Hernandez did it, and it was a really good course. And it kind of takes you, if you've come from the world where you've only worked in a style sheet and a CSS, it basically says, okay, let's take this whole big CSS and let's break it all up into SAS partials, and I'm going to, show you how the whole thing all works. So it's kind of like reverse engineered everything. And that was a great way for me to understand how it all operated. And since then,
can you find a link?
Yeah.
Can you find the link? But also, I've got to say, Jackie, you've written some nice posts on your website about SAS, and I thought they were well written, and you did a great job,
thank you,
Jackie. There we go. A plugin that I use kind of is Advanced Code Editor. I use that quite regularly. I just think it's a lovely tool. Do not leave it operating on client sites after you finish. Remove it, and you're probably going to have to harden the site, but you definitely don't want to leave this baby on too long. But I do use it. What about you, Russell? Do you ever use it?
Are we still talking about SAS and LAS?
No, we're talking about this plugin, this Advanced Code Editor.
Oh, no. I am the Advanced Code Editor. I'm going to do it myself. I try not to use plugins to let me do stuff like that, unless it's a very specific use case for it.
Yeah, but I think it's a useful tool. What about you, Jackie? Do you ever use it?
Advanced Code Editor?
Yeah, I'll just put the link in. It's a plugin. It just improves the internal code editor that comes with WordPress, and it's pretty handy little tool.
I have not used that. I don't usually do any editing in WordPress.
I was going to say, see our previous conversation about Git.
I actually, on all
Git
client
and,
sites,
SVN and
I turn the editor off on all the client sites. It's not even on their menu anymore. It's dangerous area to be in. Don't advertise
it. Is. I'm not recommending, like I said, it's kind of this show. I saw it kind of aimed at the kind of hobbyist, intermediate, somebody that that understands the risks about doing it.
If you're using a code editor, though, like Sublime or Atom, it's nice to have like PHP Code Sniffer and other things in there that really help you and beautify your code, clean it up, check it for errors. I like that stuff.
All right, then let's move on quickly because I think Russell.
He's had enough.
He's had enough of that.
I can talk about this all day.
So let's move on. Let's move on to text editors. Is he gone off?
He runs away.
I think he's mistreating his dog or something. I don't know. Right. So let's talk about text editors, Jackie. Any particular one you use?
I use Sublime and Atom. I'm trying to convert over to Atom, but I've just run into some difficulties. It crashes often, and it's. But I really like how Atom handles managing packages and your configurations, and because it's all in there. Whereas in Sublime, it's all like behind the scenes. You got to figure out where to cut and paste all these things, and it's not as intuitive to work with. Once you get it set up, it's great. It works fine. And I'm using Sublime 3, which has been in beta for, I don't know, like 100 years.
No doubt.
But Atom is pretty cool. I do like it. If I can get all the little bugs worked out of it, I'd be happy.
But so far it's been a bit crashy. It's just not been stable.
Out of the box, it works fine. It's when you want to start adding packages and code sniffers and just, all of these other things. There can be collisions, I think, from different packages.
Yeah.
And how have you found it, Russell? Which one do you use, Atom?
So I want to be very clear. When I'm doing things on my own and when I'm just kind of messing around, I'm going to use Sublime Text or I'm going to use Atom. But when it comes to like building things at Web Dev Studios or when I used to work for the National Weather Service, we were using strictly IDEs, and just because we could do unit testing so much easier, we can debug PHP and C++ so much easier using an IDE instead of trying to use this other tool and install another browser package or something along those lines.
So
what was you using, Storm?
So either Aptana Studio or NetBeans, but I like
Storm. Yeah, you're using Storm, was it?
I didn't say Storm at all. NetBeans is completely different from PHP Storm, and Aptana Studio 3 is completely different as well.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought Beans owned that Storm.
I don't think NetBeans owns. JetBrains owns them.
JetBrains owns PHP Storm, right? Yes.
Regardless, I wasn't using PHP Storm for the longest time.
All right. So basically, which one? So you go with Sublime then, Russell?
Again, it depends on the use case. When I'm doing like a really big project where we have to get it right on the first time, I'm going to use an IED. But if I'm doing something like I'm helping somebody at a meetup, yeah, I'm going to use Sublime Text or Atom.
Oh yeah. What about you, John? What do you use?
Sorry. Text editor. I use Sublime Text mostly, so I like that one.
Yeah, I either use Sublime or I use Coda, but I'm an outdated creature, but I like my Coda. So there we go. So the basic thing, these tools, folks, they go from price, and Atom is attractive, folks, because it's free. Is that correct, Russell? It is free, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Right. So there's those. So are there any other tools or things that you use, folks, that you think are really handy that you like to bring up? And I'll start with Jackie. Is anything that you use that you come your way that you use regularly that helps you a lot?
Just for development?
Well, just make your life easier, Jackie. Easy development life.
Like lately, I've been having a really good time where I'm recording videos, how-to videos for clients. If I've customized stuff for them, I use ScreenFlow and Ink2Go and make a nice little video and can put it up on Vimeo for them. And that makes my job a lot easier because they have something to go back and refer to all the time, and they don't have to come back with the same questions over and over. So, but other than that, and I love Affinity Designer, which is kind of like an Illustrator equivalent. It's very similar. It's for Mac, but it's like $49, I think it is, and there's no recurring fees. It's a lot less expensive than Illustrator, and I use that for all of my SVGs I make, or for logos, or any of those things. That's a really handy tool. I like it.
Yeah, I did have a look at that. It looked really cool. Actually,
Lynda.com has courses now on how to use it, so that's another good place if you're interested in it and you get it and you're not sure how to work it all. There's some good courses on there.
So I would have thought, Jackie, that I've got one here that I thought if you're in the SAS world, it's called Meister. The SAS
Meister.
Do you use that at all, Jackie? No. What about you, Russell?
My favorite part was she was just like, no. So we have a guy here in Vegas. His name is Ben Weiser, and he works on all the Caesar blogs, Caesar Palace, stuff like that. And so he showed us SaaSmeister and showed us how easy it was to test, compare, and to debug. And so we've been using SaaSmeister ever since.
So you think it's a great tool?
I think it's another tool that's very specific. Unlike CodePen, where you can test multiple instances, with just SaaSmeister, you're just testing SaaS to do this one thing. I think it's a good tool in that use case.
Yeah, sure. And another thing I use it is the Kraken.
Kraken.io, is that what you're talking about? Yes, yeah, very cool. I like that. I do use.
I just use it because I like to say I'm unleashing the Kraken. It just brings a smile to my face.
So you're using that. Oh, so you're using the web interface. Sure, fair enough.
For image compression, it's nice. It does work. It works really well.
Yeah, no, I just think unleashing
that
the
was
Kraken.
That was kind of a violent shift. We went from SaaSmeister to let's optimize images.
We're all over the. We're all over that.
This is blab. We've got to keep it going, Russell. We've got to keep it moving.
Does anybody else want to jump on? I mean, I'm happy to, unless you've got more stuff you want to do.
Are you SaaS?
No, I'm good. We're just coming up at the top of the hour, and I know you were saying you had other people that wanted to jump on.
I don't know if Sally wants to join us. She might have, after seeing how I've run this, she might not want to join us. But there we go. Well, you pop out for a second. Let's see if Sally wants to join us, Jackie.
See you later.
Thanks for the talk, Jackie.
Hey, you're welcome.
Thanks. So, any other tools, Russell, that you think somebody kind of intermediate developer, anything that comes to mind that you think would be useful?
So depending on who your host is, I think WP Rocket is a very good tool. It's going to help you cache. It's going to help you pull in Cloudflare CD and stuff. I really love WP Rocket just because you can use it with WP Engine, where they don't let you use the caching plugin, but they let you use WP Rocket. It's one of those tools that I think what's her name, Lucy Beers, did an amazing job on.
All right, so WP Rocket. I'm trying to find.
Yes, but don't use it while you're developing.
I think later on down the road, when you're like, I think I have my site built, now let's see what it does when it caches, you can use it. But not on the initial build. Yeah,
no, caching is a...
Thank you for clarifying that.
Definitely something you want to turn off while you are developing, because you'll be sitting there saying, why are my changes not showing up?
Yeah, so what about you, Sally? We've gone through a few stuff. Any remarks about what we've been saying and anything else that you use?
I'm mainly a Sublime Text user, and there are some auto prefixer tools for Sublime Text, which is kind of nice because, I'm a complete Flexbox junkie. And
Flexbox.
Yes, it's magic. So, there's some nice stuff you can add to Sublime Text, but I'm trying to get myself, which is to say, I'm trying to find the time to get myself set up with Git and switch to PHP Store, which we already own, and, be able to do kind of everything at once. And, because it's high time I started doing proper versioning. And I'm especially motivated because I have a client that wants to use Git with WP Engine, and all of their development, all of their developers for the software that they produce use Git and are just going to be happier if everything is accessible that way.
Well, fair enough. But any other kind of tools or things that you use generally, Sally, that we haven't mentioned that help out in your development?
I'm trying to think if there's anything that you haven't mentioned. I use the Chrome developer tools. I had not heard about the specific Firefox developer edition, so I've just downloaded that to check it out. But I do also use.
Another 2.2 megabytes gone on the hard drive.
Yeah, well, it's, I just replaced the SSD on this machine a few months ago, because the old one was, it came with like a 128 and it was full. So I bought a 250, and installed it, and in the course of the course of that, very brightly managed to loosen the connector for my keyboard and my trackpad. So I had to take the laptop in and get it fixed. And I was slightly reassured by the fact that the guy fixing it was having almost as much trouble with it as I did. But now I have the new SSD, and things are working well, and all the all the software goes on the SSD, and then there's a second internal hard drive for storing data. But we've worked with a bunch of things. I used XAMPP a lot, and my husband discovered MAMP Pro on the Mac, and now that there's MAMP Pro on Windows, I just bought a license, and I'm going to set it up and check it out. But I've mostly been developing on using dev servers on my own site, or on and it has the advantage that you are actually seeing how it's going to work on the specific instance of PHP, etc. That's that's going to be there when you launch it, but it is just a lot slower, as Jackie mentioned, for testing your changes, because you have to push them up and first and see it load. Plus, if you are a real developer, which my husband is and I'm not, you have a bunch of debugging tools that will run locally and not remotely.
Oh, well, that's a good point, Russell. For the intermediate person that's really getting into WordPress, debugging tools, debugging plugins, what's your advice about debugging and some tools or plugins that might help with that?
Debugging is one of those things that a lot of people forget to do. So it's trivially easy to say, I'm going to build this WordPress plugin, and then you go and you build your option framework and you build in all your variables, and you're like, hey, it works on my local environment, but you got to turn that debug constant on to go out and find, all right, well, I built this plugin, but did you know that it de-enqueues the jQuery inside of WordPress natively? So I just broke WordPress. So let's go ahead, turn debug on, and try to figure out why I did that. It's one of those things where you can't just test. Here's the thing, is that I don't use Genesis, but I need to test my plugin against Genesis. I need to test my plugin against other frameworks and other major players in the space, because I want my plugin to be used by as many people as possible. And if my plugin only works for EDD and not for WooCommerce, I just lost a major piece of that pie. So turning on the debug constant to see if you are breaking something is one of the greatest pieces of advice I could give when you start learning how to develop.
All right. And are there any kind of plugins or anything, other resources that you like to point out that helps with that process?
Yeah, one of them would be Query Monitor. So it shows you on a specific page how many things are being requested from the database. The other tool that I would say, Debug or Debug Bar, there's two plugins that do that. Yeah. And those will actually dump out everything that, hey, here's what you broke, here's what happens. And it does it kind of in an eloquent kind of way, where if you just go into your WP config file and turn debug to true, it's going to dump it right in the header across every single page, even on your live site, and people are going to know you broke some stuff. So I think Debug Bar for if you have to debug a live site, I would use a plugin like that and not turn on the debug constant.
Yeah, there's great, because that's a great plugin. I've used it myself, and there are some nice plugin resources that really help with that. And it's something that a lot of people forget, isn't it, Russell?
I agree, but I'd like to hear more of your thoughts on it.
Well, I think that what you were pointing out about making it incompatibility of plugins is one of the major causes of problems. So it's quite evident in some ways that if the people were maybe making the plugins, they did some debugging testing. I've never made a commercial plugin, and I never will do. So, but if I was doing that, I would want to make sure that, like what you pointed out, that it worked with the most popular plugins in that
so here's the thing, is that if you're making an e-commerce product, like let's say another plugin that does e-commerce,
because we don't have enough of those yet.
I don't think we do, to be honest with you. But so you don't want to build a post type with the same name that EDD is going to give theirs. If you call your post type EDD product, you are going to have conflicting problems. Or if you call it WooCommerce product, you're going to break. So
WooCommerce just calls it product.
I know they do.
Mm-hmm.
I just built a plugin to show me all the post types. Because here's the thing is that I didn't know that the events calendar calls their post type tribe_events. I thought it was being dumped as events or like event types, or I was looking.
You can actually tell in the admin windows up at the.
But it wasn't passing that very well. So what I was trying to figure out though is like, well, what if you go in and you change it? What am I trying to do? It was one of those things where I'm going to name my things after myself because it's a very specific case, and I don't think Jonathan would ever call his post type Russ_products.
I've been doing it for years, Russell.
But I mean, that's one of those things that you have to go and you have to check, because if you're naming your stuff WP_, you're gonna break it, because that's how WordPress rolls.
Serious trouble if you do that, and
yeah. So.
Well, I think we've lost most. I think we've managed to lose most of the audience, Russell. But there we go.
But these are if you are going to get into developing and you just go to a tutorial and you copy somebody's code and place it in your functions file and stuff breaks, this is why it breaks, is because the naming was wrong, or it's doing the same thing as this, or it wasn't built right, and you need to know how to go in and fix that.
Yeah,
that's what I was getting at.
Yeah, that's true. And I think I'm not any shape or form a developer like Russell, but the first thing you want to learn, folks, is your variables and naming them in a way where you're not going to get conflict is kind of like 101. And a lot of people don't do it, like what Russell's just said, but that's why you start getting conflict and other problems. So it's something that you should be aware of, and most people learn the hard way, don't they, Russell?
Part of the problem is SEO. So the problem with that is I jump on Google and I look for the best way to enqueue jQuery into what I'm doing. And so an article that was written 10 years ago says, oh, just go to jQuery.com and download it and enqueue it into your thing, not knowing that if they had read an article from the century, that WordPress already does jQuery for you, and you can just tack onto that instead of enqueuing your own thing. So I think SEO and articles written 10 years ago are problems for new people when they say, I'm trying to do this, and it's really bad advice.
Yeah, if I'm searching for how to do something, which I do often, because I'm one of those people that my husband calls a Google developer. I need to do something, I Google for how to do it.
That's funny. We need to make t-shirts to say I'm a Google developer. That's hilarious.
I seriously want to write an article about, confessions of a Google developer. Yes, it does not mean I work for Google. But I always restrict those searches to the past year, because anything older than that, it might be okay, but it might not too. So I want to, check on the more recent information about how to do something.
I'm going to be doing a talk in WordCamp Orange County coming up in a couple of weeks, and part of my talk is that I wished that people would put, like, how every blog post has like the byline and like the date posted. I wish after that it said, I wrote this when WordPress was version 3.6, and at least it would give me a better understanding of, oh, hey, here's how we used to do it in 3.6. Let's go and see if there's another way to do it in 4.1, 4.2, because the problem, again, is even though we have backwards compatibility, there's a lot of tools that have been deregistered that we can't use anymore, or they've been deprecated So we need to understand how to do it currently and not how we did it 20 years ago.
Right. I think there is a plugin that sort of marks posts that are older than X with a little kind of, this is older than X, but that's not quite as specific as saying, it was for this version of WordPress and that version of.
I guess essentially the date of the blog post kind of takes care of that, but then you got to go and figure out what version was released during that time. I just wish there was a way that people would clearly say, hey, I have this theme. I want you to come to Theme Forest and buy it, but just to let you know, I'm not running the latest version of WordPress because it breaks, so I'm using this version. Like I've had problems like this where I buy a theme and I import it, and I'm like, well, what happened? And I go and find out that they're not on the latest version of WordPress, or they're selling me version 2.0 of their theme, but the live version that I can see the demo is still on 1.0. Like this happens quite a bit often.
Yeah, true. It is true. So, John, have you got any kind of tools, things that you think that we haven't mentioned that you think would help somebody that's kind of starting out and that?
I've only been half listening because I've been in the chat room, but
well, I'm like that all the time.
Sounds like you have it covered to me.
He's like, I hear voices in my head all the time.
Well, it's
you mean whatever you suck up.
what's your vaping, hon?
What's in your vapor?
No, it's just my hookah. It's what I do on Saturday mornings.
Yeah, all right. I don't know where to take this. So what do you think, Sally? I tried to cover most kind of things that would help somebody because I had this pre-discussion with John where this was going to go, and I thought we would cover stuff that people that starting to do work for other
right. You might want to talk a little bit about, sort of showing stuff in progress to the client, whether you do or don't, and how you do it if you do it. And, I've sometimes used, those kind of under instruction things where you're set up, but set the dev site up and just turned off the search engines because pretty much nobody except people who know it's there. But, there does come a stage where your client usually wants to see what's happening. And, you can't do that on your local server. So that's another, use for the staging server is to, demonstrate things before they go live.
There are plugins. The one that I use constantly is called Registered Users Only. And so what it does is it hides the actual website unless you're logged in. You can't get in to see it. Essentially, it's like using Ultimate Coming Soon page, except for you're not using a plugin to hide behind. You're using a plugin to restrict authentication. But you could use a host, such as like WP Engine, where you can turn on a server authentication where you have to log into the server and then log into WordPress before you can see the site. It's taking those kind of security measures.
I've done that. I mean, I've had people ask me to troubleshoot stuff on their site, and they had to give me 2 sets of passwords, one for the server and one for the site, because, God help me, I wrote some tutorials on the events calendar, and Modern Tribe put them on their forums, and so I have all kinds of people asking me questions about how to use the events calendar.
At WebDev, everything we build for clients it is on our own site. We spin up an instance, and everything has it has server authentication, but then we're using something like you have to be logged in to see the homepage and so on and so forth. That's a much better tool to use instead of saying, please don't index my website, because Google still could come and crawl your website if somebody links to it enough times.
True. So what is there any other, you want to expand that, Sally? Because I thought it was quite interesting, because it is always, when do you want them to start looking over? because it's pretty evident you're not saying that the site's finished, but it's at a stage where you feel that getting some feedback might be necessary.
Yeah,
but when do you think
it's
that
partly
stage
getting
is?
feedback, and it's partly demonstrating progress. So, sometimes I may say, okay, I did this part. Here's where we are. Take a screenshot and post it on Basecamp if the client is using that. Something like, but you often want to show how something actually works, and and they want to know that you're doing something with that money that they paid you before you started, and
Fair point.
so it may depend on the project when that phase is, because there's probably going to be a stage where you've just sort of deployed the site and there's nothing there yet, or you're messing with the code a lot, and so things are broken half the time, and this is too soon. But you are probably going to get to a point where you have and I have situations sometimes where I'm building out functionality. And the design is not necessarily finished. I know basically where things are going and so on, but it's sort of like, yeah, well, we've done the content audit and stuff. We know what kind of custom post types we need to create, and that there needs to be an archive, and there needs to be a single, and that there need to be certain custom fields in there, and you can write the code that will show those without necessarily having the styling finalized for it.
So here's the thing: is that when I used to do freelance work, I used to take 50% of whatever the budget was up front, and that was to get me started. And then I used to charge another 40% of whatever the budget was upon showing a working demo. So I think what Sally was getting at is you're saying, listen, I'm going to take some money up front. This lets me buy the tools I need or get a server instance, whatever I need. But at some point, you're going to have to show them, here's what's working and here's what's going on. Don't worry so much about the design. We're not there yet. But let me show you that you need a shopping cart and you want people to place products into that shopping cart. Let me show you that works and that your money hasn't been wasted. That is the best case of saying, here's why I work locally and we push it to staging for just to show demonstration purposes. I don't think it's so much feedback such as like, I don't like that color green, or it doesn't feel as warm. A functioning website will convert better than a well-looking website that breaks.
Yes, which is sometimes hard to explain to clients that you first needed.
Not if you're Chris.
But, Chris is good at that. I do pay a lot of attention to what he says, and I do find clients sometimes have a hard time responding to an incomplete site because they're not sure what to expect to be done or not done.
Well, I did once have a client say to me with a totally straight face, Sally, why is there a foreign language on the website? And I had to explain to him that it was Latin. And I explained that with a totally straight face.
So that's a great point. So a lot of sites and a lot of designs come to you, or a lot of people, designers, developers, set up sites with lorem ipsum. My strong preference for that is to veer away from that and just set up a site, even if it's like, hey, I'm gonna go and cut and paste some stuff from another site. We're not using that, just so it's clear, but it just is closer to the actual intent of what the site is going to be, instead of just some fake dummy text that's every headline's the same, every paragraph's the same.
Well, and the problem with that is I ran into recently is the client is saying, well, those sections they don't line up like the design. It's like, well, because your actual text is not exactly the same length in every one of those sections, and the dummy text was exactly the same sentence every time. It looks perfect, yes, but either it's like you have to rewrite what you say so that everything is the same length, or we have to go make some adjustments so that those are in kind of boxes where the tops align, but they still won't look exactly like the design.
Yeah, and that is a big problem, and it usually involves saying okay, now we got to add some sort of either minimum width or minimum height or whatever to make everything balance out, or whatever we need to trick out in the CSS. But
redo it with Flexbox.
Yeah.
I just want to play devil's advocate. I want to play devil's advocate for a minute.
Yeah, I would have guessed, Russ.
If you are somebody who is asking Sally or John to build you a website, I'm going to guess that you don't have a very good idea about what it takes to build a website. So as a business owner, and I've worked with these kind of people, they only know about, or they only care about the logo and the business cards and the layout and the images, because that's all they know about websites in general. So you kind of can't get mad at them for saying, well, Sally, how come my logo isn't in the upper left-hand corner? And you're like, listen, that's coming later. What I'm trying to show you is that the wheel works and you can spin twine in the gold. And they're like, no, because I don't understand this crazy language you speak. Where is my logo? So I understand why some people only care about specific features when they're looking at a demo or looking at something that you built.
It's totally natural for them to think that way, and it is incumbent on us to try to explain things and why and how, and it's sometimes easier than others to convey any of that, but we got into a situation where that he had really pressured the designer about the way where he wanted the logo on the homepage and the way he wanted it to show up, and he also picked a theme with a bunch of parallax effects on all the hero images and so on, and we kind of had to walk through. Like, well, the problem is, you picked this theme that does this and that has these effects, and you'll see that even in the demo, parts of those images get cut off because of the way it's stretched and sized for the parallax. And this is why the designer was trying to persuade you to put your logo in the header and not in the hero image. And he finally got it, and I'm not sure what to do about trying to make these things clearer to clients who are not designers and still want to mess with the design a lot.
Don't let them.
The designer brought the client in, or I'm not sure I would have tolerated it.
And again, like, every client is going to be different, and you kind of have to gauge, like, it. And ideally, and I think Troy Dean has talked about this before too. Like, the first thing he'll show the client is a demo that's like unstyled, but it's like, here's the functionality. Then we're going to go build the actual site with your logo and your pretty effects and all that. And I think at a certain level, some clients understand that, but I think at different levels, like, there are other clients that don't understand that, and they're going to be like, well, they want to see it like a fully functioning thing and like fully styled. And so I think you have to gauge. But I think something that you correct me if I'm wrong, and if you've had like a different experience, but sometimes the most, I don't want to say like bad clients, but the clients that will give you the biggest pushback sometimes are the ones that maybe they took a semester of design in college, or they have like some very limited design experience, and so they feel like they should be the designer. And I think in those cases, if that, like, going into writing a proposal or a contract, you have to like put in there if you're going to like do the design, like, that's going to be a breach of contract, because that's what you're hiring us for. You don't want to position yourself as just a set of hands there to, like the oatmeal, like skit, like how design goes to hell, like where you're just the crayon that they're using. You don't want to position yourself like that. So, if
you're talking about setting that expectation of saying, listen, if you want me to build this and you want it to look the way that you want it to, I will do that. But the second you step in and you put like an aftermarket part on this, it's going to void the and you're done. You know, I'm a big advocate for that.
Well,
not that I don't want my client to help, because let's be clear, I want them to write the content. I need them to go out and find the images that they want to use. But if you are going to give me a specific box to work within, and then you're going to throw in an added variable that says, well, you're working with a box that's 1,100 pixels wide, but let's cut that in half, and now here's the box you're working in. That doesn't work well for me, because I thought I was working in this space.
Yeah. I just want to put this to Sally, actually, see if she thinks I'm right or wrong. Based on I'm not saying what.
But
Yeah,
Jonathan, I always think you're wrong.
Yeah.
You know, you're very fair normally. You could be blunt sometimes, but it's normally logical. I'm just going to put this to you. What I found was that a lot of the concentration goes on the home page. So if you're at that stage where you're putting on a live server, my advice is that you sort out the home page to whatever you feel the client was looking or what was agreed through, the initial planning process. But you definitely want to make the home page because they do seem to be kind of looking for the right word here.
Focused.
Focus fixated by what the home page should look. So definitely get that to a certain standard. It will save a lot of problems. What do you think about that, Sally?
I think you're right that that people pay a lot of attention to the homepage and the homepage design and fuss over it. But that depending on what you're doing, that may not be where you start. You may need to do a bunch of other things. What I find happens a little more often is the client has no clue about responsiveness. Even if they're somebody that uses a smartphone all the time, they're like really surprised when something doesn't look exactly the same on their phone as on their desktop, and having to go through. I'm trying to train my designer to do mobile first Photoshop layouts to get the point across that whatever you build, you have to think about how it's going to look when you stack it all up in a narrow column.
I think you're wrong, Jonathan, and here's why. Okay, yes, I think the homepage. I think the homepage is kind of like your front doors. Okay, because when somebody goes to Twitter and shares your link, they're not usually sharing the homepage. They're sharing a blog post, or they're sharing a product, or they're sharing some site that's not linked to the homepage, or they're not sharing WP-Tonic.com. They're showing WP-Tonic/podcast/54. So I think, yes, the homepage, you need to put a little emphasis on it, but the actual content that is going to help take your product viral are these blog posts, and that's where the focus should be on, or your products, or your landing pages. I think those are the bigger stars than your homepage.
Yeah, I just want to. Sorry.
I think Jonathan was maybe saying the client is fixated on the homepage, even though that's not necessarily the most important thing. Because you're absolutely right. What the search engine is going to find is probably not your homepage.
Yeah.
What people are going to share is probably not your homepage. But
can I just say something, Sally? I totally agree with you, actually, Russell, but I think it's really dependent on the sophistication of the client. If a client is reasonably successful and they're on their second, third, working with an agency, a developer, that they know the setup to some degree. I think what you've just said is totally appropriate and makes total rationality. But if you're dealing with a client that's got no real previous experience and you start saying things like that, in my experience, Russell, they read a lot of their focus, for better or worse, is the home page, Russell.
So I would combat that with saying, listen, let me show you my website, let me show you my analytics, and let me show you which page is like my number one page, and I guarantee you it's not my homepage. And
if they have a previous site, you might even want to look at their analytics.
Yeah, and just say, I understand your concerns. I understand that the homepage is one of those things that you feel says, here's who my brand is and welcome. But it's these other pages that are the meat and the backbone of your website, which makes your website as popular as it needs to be. You don't go to youtube.com. You go to youtube.com/ whatever the show, WP-Tonic Lab. I don't go to youtube.com very often.
What do you reckon, John?
Yeah, I want to jump in here. It's not just the clients that are fixated on the homepage. The whole the reason I would posit, and would say that I've worked with a fair amount of designers at this point. Different people, different places, different cities, different clients. But the one thing that's very universal is a lot of the designers focus on a desktop size mock-up of the homepage first and foremost before they do any of the inner pages. That's usually the first thing that they present to the client in the wireframe. The kind of like the inner pages and all that is like kind of secondary. The mobile, like what Sally was saying, like a big the problem in not all designers do this, but I would say probably the vast majority still start with the desktop view, and then it's usually ends up on the front end developer to make mobile decisions. And tell me if your experience is anything different, because so far, not for me. So.
Yeah,
Thoughts?
it's been basically put on me to do the to figure out how things should collapse. Hooray, Flexbox.
Yeah, I agree.
But I mean, one of the things I'm going through now is like, before you start make up a design brief and figure out how much you're going to charge the client to do the designs, we need to know like what kind of content types we're having and how many views we actually need, because we're going to need, a view for the single and archive webinar and recording, and a view for the single and archive presentation, and a view for the single and archive, press release, and all of those things. And those are things that you should design so that they all look good together, and I'm not kind of faking it. And that you should make sure that you're charging the client enough to do the designs for.
Yep. What's your thoughts, Russ?
I mean, if you have somebody who's just so focused on the homepage, and you build them this homepage, and they're like, well, how come my posts look like crap? Well, listen, you focus on the homepage. So I think it comes back down to, let's set an expectation that we're going to spend X amount of hours or maybe a couple days on this, and let's move on, because we can version out your website. Like, a lot of people forget that, like, if I want a new header on my WordPress site, I don't go buy another theme because it has a new header. I just build a new header.php. Or if I want a new single page, a single blog post, I don't need another theme. I can just build another single.php and I can rebuild that page. I think a lot of people forget that. Let's get something up and working. Let's get some money. Let's get you recuperating what you've just spent. I don't want to say lost, because I don't want clients to say lost money. But let's recuperate your bank account, and then let's version it out. Instead of, you don't have to do everything right away.
I do actually agree with you, Russell. But unfortunately, what you've just said,
it doesn't sound like you agree then with the word unfortunately.
Well, it's not that, Russell.
Listen,
it's tough setting those expectations with clients.
I think you're right. Let me tell you why you're wrong. That's kind of what it sounded like. But go ahead, Jonathan.
No,
I'm very curious.
What you were saying, it's logical, but my experience, logic with a lot of clients doesn't work.
I have to say, basically, the more professional and the better the budget of the client, the less arguing you tend to get about this. It is with the
100% on that.
Yeah, it is with the very small businesses, the people who are not that sophisticated, and the people who are just so sort of anxious about how much money are they going to spend, that tend to be the least reasonable about it. I think people who are in businesses that are just more accustomed to having to invest, and not just invest money, but invest thought and time and effort into various parts of their business, understand that they're going to have to put some thought and some work and some money into building a website that actually does what they need it to do.
It blows me away, like what you're saying, and I'm not gonna like harp on like budgets or whatever, but some people just whatever their budget is, that's their budget. But like I'm probably in the same age range as you and Jonathan, and little bit older than Russ, I'm guessing, but
I'm 30.
you remember back in the day, like,
You're an infant. You're an infant.
You're a baby.
But what I'm saying is, like, back in the day, like, okay,
I wish I was your age.
businesses had to drop like, $800 in like 1970s and 1980s money for like a yellow page, or they would just like didn't exist, and they did that without hesitation. And what you're saying, like the smaller businesses,
and it still costs that much for their yellow pages ahead, if not a lot more.
Yeah. So like the people who are like struggling with their website, it's like, why isn't my website ranking number 1? Well, that's part of it. Is you need to like actually not try and get like the kid who, just did like a class in college and this is their first site and try and scam them. You need to like get a professional like Russell or Sally or Jonathan or, somebody else to do.
I don't take direct. I'm just a maintenance guy now.
Sure.
I'm the maintenance guy.
Can I just say that?
Yeah.
If you are venturing in the business and you have a soft drink, you are not going to compete with Coca-Cola and Pepsi. But it comes back to setting that expectation. Like, let's focus on this for the next year. And here's why. And if that client says, no, we're taking down Pepsi because here's what they don't do, you walk away from that client, because that's a red flag right there. Like, you can't compete on that level. I would love to compete with Microsoft and 10up and all these companies, but you're not going to compete with them just because you're a tech blogger. You have to build that following. You have to gain that, because that's what they started with. Even though they had the millions of dollars of resources to build this website, they could have lost it, as we see most startups do, because they wrote bad content. You have to work slowly at it. You can't just expect to throw $100,000 at a website and have it be the next TechCrunch,
Agree.
Yeah. So I would also like saying, you've mentioned Flexbox a couple of times. What's your been experience? Have you been using it extensively on live sites? And the same question to the other two panelists.
Oh, yeah, I use it basically since I discovered it. I use it wherever I possibly can, because it just makes things so much easier. Vertical alignment.
Can you explain to the listeners and that what it is? And also, has the browser support got a lot better?
The browser support is a lot better. So, it's I will still use the prefixer in my CSS in case, but in fact, the modern browsers can all cope with it. Not everyone is using a modern browser. And, if you're designing for a bank that's still on IE6, then you're probably not going to want to use it. But otherwise...
can you go for what the benefits of using it are and blah, blah, blah? Can you?
Well, it means you don't have to write so many specifics for your media queries. If you say, all right, so here we have a flex container, everything inside of it is going to flex, and it will wrap at a certain point, and then you set each element in the container to basically how it's going to flex. Is it going to grow when the container gets bigger or not? Is it going to shrink when the container gets smaller or not? And you may say in either case not. And then what's the basis? Is it a certain pixel size? Is it a certain percentage? And then whatever size that container is, the elements will, shrink together, or they will start to stack up.
Well, with Bootstrap, so if you're looking at a page and you have a left sidebar, your content, and your right sidebar, when you collapse that onto a mobile screen, that left sidebar goes immediately to the top, unless you specifically say, don't show this on mobile, and then you have to build another left sidebar on mobile. With Flexbox, you can have those two columns around your content, but on mobile, drop those to the very bottom. You can drop those easily than using something like Bootstrap. I think that's one of the biggest benefits Flexbox provides.
Oh, yeah, so you've got micro control.
You've got a lot of control. You've got a lot of control. You can tell it to, generally align items so that they're, stretch or top or middle or whatever, but tell a specific item to align itself differently. You can set order for the items. You can control a lot of stuff, and it just, compared to like trying to calculate the percentage width you want each thing to be, and then the padding in between it, and the margins between it, and then the this and then that, it's just a way easier way to position stuff in a container the way you want it to be.
Yeah.
Russell, are there other benefits in utilizing it apart from the stacking order?
So one of the easiest things is it's new, and so it's newer. If you try to go start developing in Bootstrap, there's 10,000 blogs that are dedicating to building Bootstrap. You kind of feel like you're in on the ground floor with it. That's number one. Number two, though, is with what Sally was saying is when you have control and you're not spending 12 hours trying to determine whether you should have a 10 pixel or a 12 pixel padding, it saves a lot of time in that development. Or if instead of saying, I need you to be 33.1, refresh the page, 33.2, refresh the page, you can just declare it once, and it kind of figures out, hey, I'm on this size screen, let's try this, and you have a lot more to work with instead of having to get into the teeth pulling of doing all this of desktop to tablet to phablet to phone.
Oh, right. So what's been your experience with not older browsers, but let's say, the browsers that you should be developing? Has the cross-browser support been reasonable, or are there really quite big differences in Safari and Chrome and how they work with it?
Well, you're going to run into that problem regardless, just because each browser processes things a little bit differently, especially the order of files and how things are going. Yeah. But for the most part, I want to say that like 85% of the time, I'm not going to have a problem just by adding some basic Flexbox stuff to do this. I'm not going to have that problem. Where you have the problem is maybe, again, somebody's using a CSS class name or an ID name that reflects to Flexbox, not because they are using Flexbox, because they copied it from another tutorial. I think that's where I run into a lot of the problems.
All right. What about you, John? Have you been using it at all on live sites, or you just been looking at it, or what?
I read your mind, Sally. That's what happened.
You got your mic off.
That happens when I type. Yeah. Exactly. So 10up developed a really cool plugin, flexibility, and it provides support for the older versions of Internet Explorer that didn't previously support Flex, which would be 8 and 9. And so ever since that came out, I've been using Flexbox in live projects. And this is kind of like the next sequence. Like CSS back in the day, it was like tables based, and then it kind of went to like float based layouts. And now there's really not a lot of barrier to using this in live projects. So I have been. One thing that's really cool about it too, not only like the ordering on the mobile devices and stuff like that, but you can set the rules like space around or space between, to where, say, if you've got an item and there's 3 little boxes, they'll all just kind of automatically space apart.
Right, because having to set it that last child has a margin on the left but not on the right, and first child has a margin on the on the right but not on the left. You don't have to do that with Flexbox. You just tell it space between or space around, and it takes care of that.
All right.
Yep.
Sounds good too. And what have you got the link to this plugin from 10up? Actually,
yes,
John?
He's put it in there. Put it in the chat.
Oh yeah, I see it.
One thing that I will say, you'll have to use a WebKit prefix for some cases, or at least that's what I've run into. But all the rest of them, like Chrome, Firefox, it works really good. Newer, the latest, IE works pretty good. With the flexibility plugin, works like a charm in the older ones. So.
Well, I'm going to look at that because it is a great. So does it affect also centering of different items as well? Does it make that
both vertically and horizontally?
Oh, yep. That's great. That's great because you can spend all your day working all that out.
Especially, the vertical alignment was such a pain before Flexbox.
Well, especially like Sally was saying earlier, where you have two boxes and one's got a paragraph and one's got a sentence, and you're trying to vertically align those and to make those spaces. It's just horrible, you know. Ben Weiser, who does the stuff for Caesars, I don't want to put them on blast, but instead of adapting Flexbox into this design, what they did was they decided to put a check every 2 seconds and make sure these boxes are the equal height. So it's running all the stuff in the background just to make sure that it's at a 200 pixel height instead of using Flexbox. But you know, he has to take some steps to get that approved. So I understand why they did that, but it's one of those things where you could have just adapted this and it could have been done with, you know.
Right. Well, a lot of that also was, you know, a lot of these issues were kind of dealt with jQuery, and sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't it? Depending on the scenario.
I love jQuery, and if you are doing it, I don't want to say that. I love jQuery, and if you have the appropriate instance for it, I think a module or an accordion, I think using that instead of using a CSS-based accordion, stuff like that, I think it comes into a much better use case, again, depending on what you're trying to do. But I've seen the studies where it's much better to do it CSS-wise because it's going to process so much faster instead of trying to load 4 more scripts into your head, you know? So I've seen it both ways. I would still use jQuery at heart just because my brain is programmed, I need a module. Let's just use jQuery. Eventually, I will get off of that, but as of right now, I will still try to use native tools instead of trying to figure out new and inventive ways to do it. Again, just to save time, though. You know, it's not because I'm opposed to using Flexbox. It's because I know I can do this in 2 hours instead of this where it might take me 4 just to learn it.
Well, I will look at Flexbox a bit more just out of interest, because when I was looking at on CSS Tricks, he did quite a few posts about it, but the browser support looked very tricky when I was looking at it.
Yeah, but that post is old.
Yeah, it was over a year ago when I looked.
That's the point I was trying to make about CEO, and you know, it's like, hey, you should do this thing with Flex, and it's like, no, that's not how it's done anymore, or there are better things that you should do with it. So
has he not really published anything new about it, Sally, or is that still really
various newer things have been published about it, but that was a very, you know, that post got a lot of traffic, so it still comes up. Now, it's not, you know, the initial how to do stuff with Flexbox stuff is fine. It's just that, you know, if you go over to you know, can I use, you now find that, it will work.
Have you got any kind of resources, URL, that tells you about the browser support at the present moment?
The browser support,
the Can I Use.
Everything is at, you know, caniuse.com.
Right.
I'm going to throw this in here, too. This is a cool little game.
Treehouse, and
And this is like a cool little game. You don't cost you no money. It's just out there, and it'll help you kind of like, it'll give you like little challenges to kind of teach you about Flexbox.
Well, this sounds really exciting, because so much time was wasted on some of these minor stuff, wasn't it? It just kind of that's how you get a hairstyle like mine, Russ, when you get to my age.
I'm already there, my man.
No, you got a lot more hair than me, mate. Look at me and John.
Yep.
All right. Anything else anybody wants to talk about? Because I'm a bit blabbed out now. I think we've had a good. What do you reckon, Russell? I think we've covered a load of good stuff, haven't we?
I think the 3 major takeaways here are that there are an abundance of resources that you could eventually use to build a project. That's number 1. Number 2 is defining what you're trying to build and then going to find the tools to build it, instead of saying like, oh, I found this membership plugin, let's build your membership around this plugin. You should figure out how your memberships need to work and find the plugin to match that. And the third takeaway here is that it's going to take time and it's going to take a little bit of resources to build these things. You can't do it overnight.
I think that's great. You're going to get annoyed with me again, Russell, a little bit, but everything you said is the problem is it's budget. But then what you said, if it's a red flag and it's obvious and you can afford not to take the client, it's probably better to walk away, isn't it, Russell? They're not suitable.
I've walked away from a number of clients where it's just like, oh, we want this. I'm done. Sorry. Like, here, like we're gonna part ways. I'm gonna help you find somebody else, but you are not going to dictate what we're trying to do in this scenario.
Yeah. What do you say, Sally? Do you think we covered? You joined us a little bit later, but it's been a great discussion.
I was in almost at the beginning, so and I think it's been a pretty good talk about tools. The thing, I think one point that I've seen on a couple of tutorials is, don't keep chasing the shiny in terms of your developer tools. Is if you find something that does what you need and you can get to know it well, and use it quickly and easily, then you might explore something new occasionally as a developer tool. But if you keep trying to learn a new one every week, you're not going to get good enough at any of them for them to speed up your development process.
That's a great point, Sally. I want to ask Russell to kind of finish off with around SaaS. Because I always saw the benefit of it if you were dealing with a large project, Russell, and you had like thousands and thousands and thousands of lines of CSS, and the benefits of SaaS or LAS. But do you think now it's really, really very beneficial if you're just doing smaller projects, that you would still utilize those tools and learn SaaS?
Yes, I think you should learn SaaS regardless of what project you're working on. But I think that, to satisfy a workflow, you have, if I'm using SaaS on this big project and then I have to decompress my brain to go work on native CSS here, not that that's a problem, but if I can just jump into another project and that developer and I'm a developer and we both have the same understanding and we can read each other's code and we don't have to keep jumping back and forth. Yeah, I think it's a good case in saying, here's why we should all be using the same thing or relatively the same things.
Yeah, it does have attractions. Yeah, I get it. What's your feelings, John? Do you think we covered a lot of stuff?
Yeah, I think we gave people a lot of resources, say if they're either building a site or they're wanting to get into development or they're just starting to build sites for other people. It's like a lot of places where you can start, a lot of resources that you can use, and giving you a good idea of how people use those tools in the real world.
Well, folks, I think we've had a good blab. Have a great weekend. Get up to mischief. Make loads of money. Be happy. Especially you, Russell, because you're much younger than me. So
I'm always happy if that's what you're implying.
You're happy. You're not a grumpy English person like me. So no, I've been quite chirpy today, haven't I think I am. There we go. Well, I'm going to kick your folks out. Thanks for coming on. Stay on, John.
Peace out, people.
Stay on, John.
I'm staying on.
I'm going to kick ladies out first. Guys, Sally. All right. So what do you reckon? I thought we had a good show there, didn't we?
That was a great show.
Yep. We want to talk about our guest next on the podcast.
Sure, let's go over it. Yes, Devin.
Introduce. We've got a guest for our podcast next week, folks. Our first guest with my new co-host, John Locke. Say something, John, about our guest. Introduce him.
So Devin Williams, he runs WordImpress, which is behind the Give plugin, which is a donation plugin. And they're a really rock solid plugin company in the WordPress ecosystem. We know several of the people that work there, and we like those folks.
Yeah, it should be fun. He's a great talker, great guy, bloody handsome, isn't he? Talented, handsome, intelligent. It's disgusting, isn't it, John?
Yeah, he's like the opposite version of myself. Yes, exactly.
It is, just young, got loads of money, talented. It makes you sick, doesn't it? But it should be a great discussion, shouldn't it? So thanks so much, John. I think we've had a good show today. Thank you so much for your support, John.
No problem. Thank you.
I'll see you at the beginning of next week.
Yep.
We rock on. See you
Rock
later.
on, my brother.
On.
See ya.
Right. I'm going to kick you out, John. There
Kick me out. Do it.
They're all kicked out. Hopefully you've enjoyed the show. Go to WP-Tonic. The version of this will be on there at the end of this today. Go to the YouTube channel. There's almost 100 videos. We're getting close to episode 100. That's going to be a special. I'm thinking about that show already. Thanks so much for listening, and come back next Saturday where we're going to be discussing more about the world of WordPress. See you later, folks. Peace.